pleasure of introducing the poster child of citizen activism. I wish I could clone her. We'd have New Jersey back next week. Her name is Deb Sutton. And the old adage, you want to know what's going on, follow the money, is true. She's been doing that now for years. She's going to be disclosing things about her hometown and her county as simply, because you know they love to cloud these issues, as simply as possible. And if you follow along with her, I promise you, it may knock you off the seat. And I hope it makes you mad enough to get to the second part of it, which is the short workshop I do, to show you what you can do to stop it in your town. Because I got to tell you people, it's happening in your town and happening in your county. And your power of no is loudest in your own backyard. That all said, also helping and assisting Deb is Donna Ward. She is running as assemblyman down in the 5th District, assemblywoman, assemblyperson. Assembly, she's running for assembly, all right? And there's not much you could do for her insofar as voting up here. But if you know anybody down there, do influence. And so Donna Ward is here, Deb is here. Without further ado, listen attentively. This will be a crossing the learning curve like you won't believe.
Thank you very much, Adrian. That was really sweet. And I have to say, if it wasn't for Adrian and Donna helping me to understand Oprah's and filling them out, what to look for, I would have never found where I am right now. I was at my town meeting, which is Mantua Township, and it's way in Gloucester County, way south of here. And we have about 15,000 people, and I heard the mayor at the close of a meeting, under his breath, very condescendingly, "We're going to refund that bond. I don't care what the blah, blah, blah the people have to say." Well, I thought, refund, money, right? We're going to get something back? I'm sorry. After you see this presentation, you tell me if it's your friend or your foe, because when you start thinking about your township debt, my town is roughly $40 million in bond debt. 23.6 million happens to be our high school and our elementary schools. You vote on your school bonds. Do you ever vote on the bonds that they refund, which is refinance? You don't. All those closing costs go into it. You never see it. Your township bonds, when they float them, there's usually a little write-up, you know, in that like 0.003 point print size that you could never read. It's sometimes in the newspaper, living section. Maybe yours would be in the local section. Mine's in the living section. And it will disclose what they're planning on buying, but you would have no idea. And if you do not get the newspaper anymore, which quite a few of us do not, we would not be privy to it. You do not vote on those bonds, okay? That's your mayor council or mayor committee that does that. So that's how I became aware of it. Every town must put out their annual debt statement. It's done December 31st. This is 2010, and this will say, well, I know it's a little hard to read, but this will tell you it's 26.3 million in school. How much is in the town for the total? Close to $40 million. And this is for 15,000 people. I'm going to start. I belong on the school board, the elementary school board. Back in 1990, they wanted to do major renovations to an elementary school, also acquire more property. Back in 1990, I guess they weren't really sure about going out for bond, or maybe they didn't want to make a dent into or an impact on the credit rating of the town, so they decided to do a lease purchase. If they made the 20 years worth of payments, they would have paid a principal amount of $7,133,000 for 20 years. This would be over 20 years. However, they decided after 2 years that they would scrap the lease purchase and then go to a bond. In that 2 years, we paid down in principal $10,000. We paid $1.1 million plus in interest. Okay? Now, that would mean if we paid that principal down $10,000, we should be refining or bonding out, putting a new bond out for $7,123,000. How come the bond went out for $7,365,000? People, the public wasn't educated to it, they weren't aware, but that's closing costs. And I really would like you to remember this number. It's $435,000. That's a principal payment that is supposed to be made in 2003, because this bond is going to be commingled with another bond. Okay? They kept this bond to be paid off in the same time frame, so this bond would be done, fully paid out, 2010. So they only had an 18-year bond, okay? So they didn't change the time frame on it. But Mantua also has 2 other elementary schools that needed a great deal of work, remodeling. They have a resolution where they will discuss this at the school board. And they decided that they could go up to they were going to put a new bond out for $15,836,000. This is in the year 2000. Now, there are a couple of things here. When you start looking at the actual project costs, this is where all your closing costs are associated. The actual cost of that bond is $16 million. Some of this stuff you pay up front. What you end up with is roughly what you get to use. But these are the same attorneys, the same banks, the same insurance companies that are getting this money. And they are the approved government, you know, solicitors and so forth by your towns. So, then 2002 comes along, and granted, now you have to remember, the school board is made of members that are elected. They may not have been there in 1990. They may not have been there in the year 2000, so they have no idea of the history that has passed. However, they decide to refund the 1992 bond and the 2000 bond. They take the principal amount, which is $4,075,000. The next bond was $10,311,000. If you add those together, you will come up with $14,386,000. But yet they will authorize up to $15,800,000. It's closing costs, my friends. This is keeping us perpetually in debt. Now, when the actual closing costs, I'm going over this here because you have to understand something. We pay for insurance for these bonds, whether it be banks that buy them, whether it be investors. You know, you can invest in bonds, municipal bonds, like you could stock. Well, most people think that they have a security since there's an insurance behind it. There are 3 very large insurance companies that back your municipal bonds. One is AmBank, the other is MBIC, or MBIA, and FGIC. FGIC and AmBank are both bankrupt. FGIC has been ordered to liquidate. MBIA has been downgraded into junk territory, which means it's worthless. So I hate to say this, but pension plans are heavily invested in what they thought was a very secure. And I'm just trying to make you aware this is something that is very scary for me as well as many people. But when you start looking, here are your closing costs that are associated with that bond.